Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Akinwolere. This is the third and final part of our multi-club ownership series. We've learnt how multi-club operations work and provided some practical examples from the world of football. Today, we answer your questions on the effectiveness and future of MCOs. So can we say for certain multi-club ownership is here to stay? Right. We've got Matt Slater with us for the third and final time in the series. Matt, stellar effort so far. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've got questions from the listeners on MCOs. We'll also be hearing from a fan of a club which is part of a multi-club ownership model a little later on. So, Matt, if you don't mind, let's just dive straight in. I've got one here from Adam M. And Adam's one is around Leicester. He says, Leicester fan here, can't see any positive from our multi-club model. Our youth players go to OH Leuven, which is the Belgian club owned by the King Power International Group, and they never get played. Equally, some highly talented players are there who are coveted by Premier League teams, but Leicester haven't leveraged the relationship to sign them. So what's the point? I mean, this touches on some of the stuff we've already talked about in the last two episodes. What is the point, Matt?
Well, I think it's really interesting. You know, someone said stellar. You said stellar efforts. Leuven, of course, is famous for being the home of Stella Artois and a big university. And then their football team. Now, I think it's a great question because there was an absolute trend a few years ago of loads of clubs just buying a Belgian team, buying a Belgian or a Dutch or a French second division team, and going, yeah, we've ticked the multi-club box. We're thinking about Brexit. We're thinking about, where players are. So there's been loads of studies. If you look at kind of hotbeds of football talent, London, Paris, Brussels, these are the places that come up. Brazil. So to be in these places sort of made sense. But when I look at that Leicester relationship, it's right. I mean, what have Leicester got out of it? Very little evidence I can see of a kind of coherent strategy, of any real attempt to kind of maximise that footprint in the Belgian league. Do they play similar styles? Have they exchanged coaches? What's the relationship like between sporting directors? I can't see it. Now, there have been players that have gone there on loan. So I think in 2020, I think there were 3 or 4 Leicester players that went there. One was a guy called Kamel Sower, I remember at the time. People who had high hopes. I think he's Ghanaian forward. But, it didn't come to anything. And last time I looked, he's playing somewhere else, I think in Belgium or the Netherlands, and just hasn't scored any goals. I think he's got one international cap. I think he went to Bruges on a decent fee, but didn't score any goals for them. So just wasn't good enough. Now that happens. This is the problem. Recruitment's hard. But it's almost like, well, is that it? Is that the closest you've got? Now, there's a good player now, Ezekiel Benzouzi, a midfielder. High hopes for him, Dutch international. But West Ham are in for him. So is it Leicester sort of thinking the group? Well, we need the fee. We need to cover the losses we've been bearing at both clubs. Does he fit with Leicester City? Leicester City going down. I mean, I'm not seeing any sort of sense of strategy, which is what we heard from AJ Swoboda. One, I think he said something really, really intriguing to me, that a really, really good network, a really, really good multi-club model is probably only getting 1 transfer in the network per season. And he said more averagely, it's kind of once every other year. Which, if you think about it, that's almost what really good clubs expect from their academy. So we go to all this effort of creating these networks thinking you're going to improve that ratio, and you don't really. And, we heard from Larry Berg. We asked him about the LAFC network, which is smart. They're sort of sharing some of the costs of some of the strain, if you like, with Bayern, a kind of a bigger club. And he admitted, he said, look, it puts a real strain on my management team. We shall see, right? He's talking about flywheel. He was talking about kind of that virtuous circle and a thesis that hasn't been proven yet. And then, of course, we got Tim Bezbatchenko, whose job it is to make the network work. That is what he does for Black Knight. And I just think when I look at Leicester City and Leuven, I think about Vincent Tan, Cardiff City. They had a club, United World Group, which was the Sheffield United group. They had clubs. They did nothing. It did nothing. And I just wonder if they did. I don't think they had put enough resource in, enough thoughts. City Football Group. One of the reasons it kind of works, I'm sure we're going to get into that, is they've thrown people and money at it. So it's hard.
Okay, sorry, Adam. Not good news on that one. No. And considering Leicester are currently what?
Well, I think Adam. I think it's just been a bit of a waste of time. It's how has it worked? It hasn't.
No, you're spot on. I'm just thinking where Leicester currently are in the league, and second from bottom, really. So, it's a really tricky time for that club at this moment in time. Right, let's move on. We've got a double header one from Nathaniel. Let's start with the first one, Matt. This one is on the profitability of MCOs. Nathaniel states, when you factor in the initial purchase cost and the ongoing yearly profits or losses, do multi-club networks actually make money? Even if they don't turn a profit in the short term, would their potential sale value end up being higher than they cost? Sale value is interesting on this one, Matt.
Yeah, very. I mean, again, this is something we've heard in the series. I've not had a chance to really sort of dig into all of them because there's so many of these groups now of all kinds of sizes. I think recent UEFA estimates, something like 350 clubs in Europe are part of networks, and it's been growing. So there may well be one that I just can't think of right now that is actually turning an annual profit. I'll be surprised though, and I suspect it's more likely that they, at best, are breaking even. So that shouldn't surprise people, right? Because running football clubs is hard. Very few of them are profitable, consistently. They might have a kind of great year or two of transfer fees or an amazing run in Europe or a lot of success. But it's very hard to be consistently profitable, particularly post-COVID. The whole industry had a real shock through COVID and hasn't really got back to profitability, but kind of sustainability really. So the fact that you might have 2, 3, 4 loss-making clubs, the losses add up. So that's hard, right? So let's park that one for a bit. What we heard from Larry in particular is, ideally, he's a money guy, doesn't want to lose money. None of these people do. We want them to be as sustainable as possible. We want to be successful because being successful on the pitch means we earn more money, full houses, better sponsors, more prize money. It's all good. More eyeballs and on it goes. Mm-hmm. They are thinking of the profit on the way out. These are now considered to be assets in the same way that you might own property or a company or gold or whatever. It's an asset class. You often hear this kind of language. And they are a scarce asset. There's only so many of them, particularly in North America. There's only so many sports franchises. In Europe, there's only so many really good ones. There are only so many teams in the good leagues. And people want them. People do want them. Trophy assets, they're fun. We've talked about a lot of this stuff. So the actual value of the teams continues to rise, and that has been consistent for 30, 40 years. They are going up. So that's where the profitability is. So a really good example here would be City Football Group. They're the most famous. They've got 13 clubs, and they have been spending a fortune on their clubs. The total combined losses of the group is now basically £1 billion. Right, £1 billion. Wow. And that doesn't include the costs of acquiring some of these franchises. Well, Man City is the obvious one. I think they spent $200 million on there. I think they paid a franchise fee at NYCFC of about $100 million. The others would be pretty small because they're smaller clubs, tiny to be honest. So you're thinking, right, so they've spent all this money to acquire these assets. They're losing money. The City Football Group makes small profits. The rest of them lose money. The total group loses lots of money. What's the plan here? But then you look at how much the value of those assets has risen. So Man City is worth, I don't know, 3-4 billion now. New NYCFC is really interesting. So $100 million franchise fee to buy this new franchise in MLS. I think the last estimate I saw for it was just under $1 billion. So 10x.
Wow.
10x in, was it 2016, 2017? Now, Important to factor in. They have not yet built their stadium, so there's going to be another big expense there. So again, big capital expense. But MLS team with the connection to City Football Group, they've already won the MLS Shield once, so they've had success, and an amazing soccer-specific stadium. That's going to be worth a lot of money. So that is where the investment thesis is. That's where the return is. You've got to sort of work out, why are these people doing it? They're losing money because football's expensive. You don't really make much money, but the value of the assets keeps rising. If they get it right, they can make money on the way up.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you put it that way, think of it as assets. But then I don't know which football fan would like to think their club is an asset.
No, football fans hate this language.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's move on to the second part of Nathaniel's question. It says, this is actually about City. We all know CFG, City Football Group, is led by some of the brightest minds in both football and business. So why is it that most of their teams aren't as successful as Manchester City? Is it because all the clubs are focused on supporting Manchester City's global dominance? This is fascinating, because are we feeding the club at the top of the pyramid fundamentally? Because no one at the bottom of the pyramid wants to think that they're going to lose their best players just so that top team can make their billions.
Yeah, this is a good question. There's a bit of a, I suppose it's about perception, right? So Man City have just been brilliant, right? I've lost count. I mean, was it 4 in a row? Pep's won 6. They've been amazing for 10 years. So have the other clubs been as successful as Man City? No, they haven't. But they have been quite successful. I think 2021 in particular was an amazing year. That was the year that NYCFC won their MLS. Mumbai City, their Indian team, have won a couple of trophies there. I think one was in 21, one in 23. The team, Torque in Montevideo, the Uruguayan team, they got promoted that year. Girona got promoted.
Girona is the one.
They're sort of historically good for them. They got a partnership with Yokohama in the J League. I think they won in 21. 2021 is particular in that I think they won 4 teams in the CFG group won a title. Now, it hasn't been as good for the other teams since. That's true. If you look at some of the investments they've made, so Troyes and Lommel, for example, are very clearly bought as feeder teams, feeder clubs. Like, kind of, in baseball terms, they'd be your sort of single A team. That is where they expect to park 18, 19, 20-year-olds to get them playing time in a European league, and just to see if they're good enough. Melbourne City, of course, are the other teams. So Melbourne City have had some success in Australia. In terms of, it's almost like they haven't bought other genuinely good teams. That's why NYFC is probably the exception to the rule, and I think they probably would like NYFC to be better. And I think once they get their stadium, it's just, MLS is a flat league, like a lot of the North American leagues. It's very hard to have dynasties there. So we'll have to sort of track that one. But I understand where the question's coming from. I think that, one, they may have forgotten that 2021 was quite a good year for the group. 2, that they probably aren't trying to win everywhere because they haven't chosen as clubs with the capability of winning, with as big as capability of winning as Man City. And I think the sort of underlying influence is that, yes, the group is channeled to make Man City good. If you have someone good enough in the group, a Savio, for example, they will get funneled up and sent to the first team. It's a bit like kind of the first 15 at school or something. Everyone is sort of building towards that. And then again, I like my answer for Red Bull. What is it that the Abu Dhabi-based owners are trying to do here? They're trying to be in strategic markets. They've got a team in China, they've got a team in India, they've got a team in New York, they're in South America, they're outposts in Europe, they're in Brazil now. It is all very strategic.
Is this a slightly different model, though? If we spoke to the Black Knight Football Group, with Bournemouth and Auckland FC, and obviously minority stake in Hibernian and FC Lorient, you look across the board, all those teams seem to be in a really interesting position in their league. Some at the top, some looking at promotion, and obviously Bournemouth looking at European football next season.
Well, I chose Black Knight on purpose. I was thinking about all the groups that are doing well, and I thought Black Knight are just having a really, really good 12 to 18 months, and they're relatively new. They are clearly really thinking about it. They have a clear top of the tree, but they're quite honest about it. It's because it's their Premier League team, and they think that the Premier League is the best league, and that's where players want to go. And I think we'd agree that's that. We're not saying anything controversial there. We're not being unnecessarily parochial about it. They bought Bournemouth. They got a great price, as you noted. The smallest stadium in the top flight here. They've got plans to do something about that.
Seater or
yeah,
something.
It's tiny, and they rent it. Bournemouth were a third tier team for most of their history. I still get annoyed. The day I met my wife, I was coming home from Bournemouth versus Southend United. We bumped into each other at a train station. So this is
one of those days, mate. Bournemouth have gone.
So this is how I view Bournemouth. So well done, Black Knight. I think LAFC, another interesting one, but their models. They're kind of clearly kind of investment guys that sort of see entertainment industry, football's exciting. It's the global game. There's upside. I think we can do it better. A little bit of that kind of North American can-do. Some people might say arrogance, whatever. Okay, they can do it better. And they are about winning, and they think that winning equals return on investment. So, I don't know how you as a fan, how you feel about that is totally up to you. But at least they want to win. It's better than laundering money. It's better than trying to steal your land. There's lots of worse owners with worse motivations.
All right, hi everyone. Quick one from me. Just want to say this. We'd love to hear from you. We're asking you to fill out a quick survey about you and your podcast habits by going to theathletic.com/athletic/survey25. 3 lucky entries will win $100 or pounds worth of Amazon vouchers as well. So whether you're a long-time listener or a new one, we want your feedback. Go to theathletic.com/survey25. The link is also in our episode description. Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from a fan of an MCO club, Olympique Lyonnais. Okay, now we're joined by our Lyon fan, Malek, here for some background on Olympique Lyonnais. Now, they're owned by Eagle Football Holding Limited, a multi-club group who also own Premier League team Crystal Palace, Brazilian side Botafogo, and Belgian side Molenbeek. Now, Lyon have been handed a provisional relegation to League Two, the second division of French football, and will observe a transfer ban following an audit of their finances. Malek, so good to have you with us, and very interesting times ahead for Olympique Lyonnais. Firstly, tell us, as a fan, how you feel about being part of a club that's owned by, a multi-club ownership.
So first, guys, thank you for welcoming me. Happy to share these thoughts. So, of course, that is going to be my personal opinion, but it's really hard to be part of a group. It's always a matter of you being fan of your club, being a supporter of your club. So when I'm asked, am I an Eagle or an Olympique Lyonnais fan? Of course, I am an Olympique Lyonnais fan. I don't feel like having brotherhood with Molenbeek or Botafogo. My only matter is Olympique Lyonnais, and of course, I'm sometimes I'm fearing what our Eagles plan, because these plans have definitely an impact on Lyon finance, but also Lyon, I would say, football project. And maybe we can talk about it afterwards. It's going to be the next question. But the financial plans of Eagle they have definitely an impact on Lyon, and we can see this impact daily. In the, as you mentioned, the DNCG has given a transfer ban. We're having issues with the local regulator, financial regulator, the DNCG, and this is definitely linked with Eagle's plan.
Yeah, Malek, so just for our listeners that perhaps don't know that much about Eagle football, the main owner there is John Textor, who I think we've talked about on this podcast. We've actually had him on this podcast many years ago. We've mentioned the clubs involved. It's an ownership group. He has investors. He borrowed a lot of money from Ares, which is a big private equity firm that's very involved in the sports world, to basically buy Olympique Lyonnais, which are by far the biggest club, I would say, in his group. Crystal Palace might disagree. He owns 45% of Crystal Palace. He owns pretty much all of Olympique Lyonnais now. Is it about 80? How much does he own of Lyonnais now?
It's around 97.
97, yeah, exactly. And the complexity at Lyonnais is that they were a listed company. They were on the French stock market. So there are rules that he has had to follow when he made this takeover. Now, Malek, that's the background. If we think about the impact on OL, he has bought you with borrowed money, and then he started to sell your assets. So let's just go from there. What has he sold so far?
I just wanted to have a quick word regarding Crystal Palace. It's really important to remind everybody that Eagles only hold 40% of Crystal Palace. So is it the main club? Of course, Crystal Palace is a big club, and having a Premier League club is really important. But Eagles doesn't have a Premier League club, which is to me really tricky if you want to handle nicely and with ambition an MCO structure. So
agreed.
Just, between brackets. So as far as Olympique Lyonnais is concerned, I think Olympique Lyonnais was targeted for this. It was, of course, a target on which you could bid at the time, because former President Jean-Michel Aulas wanted to sell Olympique Lyonnais. And I would just sum up the assets. The main one is the stadium, still owned by Olympique Lyonnais, by OL Group, now Eagle Football Group. But they've pledged some assets. So the stadium is part of the financial burden of Eagle. Beside that, Olympique Lyonnais, Eagle Football Group used to have OL Group. I'm going to call it OL Group just because it's easier, because I don't want people to be lost between Eagle Football Holding, Eagle Football Group, Eagle Football Holding.
It is complicated.
It is. Not that much, and I'm happy that you say it that way, because I think there's a tendency to complicating things. Olympique Lyonnais used to have an arena called LDLC Arena, in which you could do concerts, mainly basketball games from the local team as well, which is really well known, owned by Tony Parker. This arena, the company holding this arena, has been sold to Jean-Michel Aulas. So Jean-Michel Aulas has taken back his baby, we call it that way. Also the women Olympique Lyonnais has
very famous women's football team.
Yes, one of the the best European team.
Times, yeah.
Exactly. Has been sold to Michel Kang, which is a business partner of John Textor. And finally, OL Reign, which was a club in the US, a women club, has been sold as well for around 50 million euros. They didn't mention it. It was 70 for the arena.
So Malek, my follow-up question is, as a OL fan, a few years ago, you were part of a football club, or you were a fan of a football club that had a really good women's football team, had an offshoot in the States, had done the clever thing, had diversified your revenue stream by having an arena where you could do concerts. You looked and sounded like a very clever football team. You then have an investor that comes in, fine, he spotted that you're a clever football team, and then to fund his acquisition of your club, he starts selling the assets. How does that feel?
You're killing me right now.
That was what I was going to ask, because it's true. It's true. Yeah. The football fan, and we've seen it before, Matt, an investor comes along, and were you happy that when an investor was coming along, or did you want it the old way as well?
Yeah, that's a nice question. As you know, Jean-Michel Aulas, the former owner, was there for 30 years, and he has done an amazing job trying to first rise with this club, and then diversify its activity to make it a real company, real sports company, I would say, or I would call it an entertainment company more than a football club.
Of course,
And was able to do this. And when John Textor took over, that was the main question: is he going to go in that vein? Sorry, or is it maybe just restructure the whole thing. Yeah, it has been restructured. Of course, it is, I would say, risky from one standpoint, because of course we are pledging all our knowledge, all our strategy on the man football. But we have this RS debt. We have also this Olympique Lyonnais debt. So there's this two layers debt, which is critical to understand. If you don't have this in mind, you think, oh, that's fine, we just have this RS debt. But at OL level, you have huge debts that have been increasing for Textor tenure of more than 30%, while the assets have been going down.
Yeah.
So you have the club is put at risk. Of course, the risk is I would say moderated, because we have the IPO and we want this to succeed.
Well, I was going to get onto that, Malek. So just to be fair to John Textor, because he's not on the call.
Yes.
So he would say, okay, right, I've bought OL, I have borrowed some money, and I've therefore sold some assets. But now OL are part of a network. So this is part of a series of multi-club podcasts, and we've heard very much the benefits, the positives of why you try to do this. So he's saying OL have joined this network. They have a connection with a Premier League team. We've got a team in Belgium. And very sort of excitingly, he would say, we have a relationship with Botafogo. And look how well Botafogo have done. So, how has he done so well at Botafogo?
You're kidding me again. No, of course. He has done, but I need to highlight this. I think that the South American football industry is way different from what you can have in European football. And if you pledge some money, if you pledge some assets, and you do a nice thing, and I must say the strategy was nicely done, but it was done for a year, and I'm eager to see what Botafogo is going to do this year, since they had some trouble funding their activity, because the money from Botafogo need to go back to Lyon, since at the first place Lyon funded Botafogo. Another thing that I want to mention is the fact that Olympique Lyonnais was very well known for homegrown players, and this is really important, because an homegrown player costs nothing, close to zero, and you can sell it with a maximum benefit. And the Olympique Lyonnais board has taken this liberty of trying to restructure the training center, which is part of the Olympique Lyonnais identity, but also part of the business plan. Formally, that it has brought a huge amount of money.
Yeah, so many players. Rayan Cherki right now. I mean, what a player.
For example, Karim Benzema, if I just quote the best, maybe Karim Benzema also. I could quote many of them. But yeah, it brings money, and now they've decided just to do some kind of synergy between clubs. Of course, you can definitely try to do this, but at some point you need to create players. Growing. You need to grow players if you want to grow money.
Yeah. Very quickly before we wrap up, let's go back to you as a football fan. This is your boyhood club. What is your relationship with Olympique Lyonnais right now, especially with the relegation, and especially with what we've talked about? Do you want to go to football matches? Do you want to see your team play?
I'm always joking with one of my guys, saying that I'll be, if we get relegated, or I don't know, maybe if we have financial issues, I'll be happy to play for Lyon just for free. And that's the relationship I have with the club. I love the club. I love following it. I still love my Olympique Lyonnais, as many fans do, and I watch each game. To me, it's really important. That's kind of my ritual in the weekend. I watch my Olympique Lyonnais game. So of course I'm following them. Of course I'm supporting them. Of course I'm following. If I'm following the financials, it's because I love the club also. And if I'm sometimes, and Matt has highlighted it, if I'm too much of a critic on Olympique Lyonnais, because I love Olympique Lyonnais at the end. I would be eager to maybe once speak to John Textor, tell him I love my club. I know what you're doing. You have an ambition that might not match my interest in as a Olympique Lyonnais fan, but I applaud what you're trying to do. Multi-club ownership is something really interesting. I'm not sure, so it is perfectly done at Eagle level. As I mentioned, we need a Premier League club if we want to take it to the next level.
Yes, Malek, thank you so much for your contribution. And Matt, that was such an interesting chat with him, and the topics he covered really ties well in with the question from David S. David doesn't hold back, so get ready for this one. It's a long one, a bit like my questions as well. Right, David states, the very concept of multi-club ownership is an abomination and the antithesis of what football should be about. We all reluctantly accept that the days of being owned by your local millionaire are done, but legislation should restrict owners or shareholders to a stake in a single football club across all levels of professional and semi-pro football. Multi-club ownership throws up potential for conflicts of interest, asset stripping to prop up the most profitable club in the group, and the prospect of sheer neglect towards the smaller clubs in a portfolio. It's disturbing, if not surprising, that UEFA and FIFA have been so slow to act on this. Now, this alludes to some of the conversations we've had with Lisa and Andy in a previous podcast about an independent regulator coming to the Premier League. What are your thoughts on this one, Matt?
Well, it's a good question because it kind of sums up all the fears. So for me, like I said several times, unproven thesis. It feels like an experiment we're living through. So how many times have I said running football clubs is hard, right? They're loss making. So if you own several, you're making it even harder. So that's a concern for me. And if you have a failure at one, you have that kind of contagion risk. So 777 is probably the poster boy for, oh my word, when it goes wrong. So that was this American investment firm based in Miami that started accumulating football clubs for a completely bizarre reason. I mean, they thought, again, they were arrogant and they thought they could do it better, player trading and back office savings. But the main guy there was a guy called Josh Wander, who gave a notorious interview to the Financial Times where he talked about football fans being eager to be monetized, and that this network of clubs was a kind of a great big shopping window for sponsors and for, credit cards and insurance firms to sign up fans, and you'd be a fan of the group. Complete nonsense, and it all fell apart. The contagion risk was huge there. They owned Standard Liège, Hertha Berlin. They nearly bought Everton. Thank God they didn't. They've got a stake in Sevilla, Vasco in Brazil, Red Star Paris, club in Melbourne. I mean, Genoa. They're all for sale, and some of them have been bought and changed hands. So that's a risk. And then, as Malek talked about, just that feeling, and I think that kind of underpins that runs through the question, doesn't it? That it just doesn't feel quite right. It's new, so change is always a bit odd for us, but it just doesn't feel right. If you think about where this all started, it was my town versus your town, that city versus that city. Our badge, our shirt versus your badge, your shirt, and if we're all part of networks, what are we doing here? This doesn't. We're not talking about brands of clothing or coffee. This is sport. This is supposed to be, get it right down to its brass tacks. It's sort of my school versus your school, and we want our owner to really care about our club because he wants to beat that club and that owner. So I totally understand where the question's coming from. The reason this is happening is the industry isn't quite working. So this runs through so much of what we talk about. Why are we having a regulator? Why do we have rows about financial distribution? Why do we do podcasts about Bury and Macclesfield and other clubs in administration? It's because it's an industry that doesn't quite function that well. Are they businesses? Sometimes we talk about them like they're businesses. They act like they're businesses. They use business language, but they don't make any money. Businesses that don't make money normally fail. You shut them down and you don't mourn them, unless, sometimes you do mourn them, but often they just go. But football clubs, no, they're more important. They are cherished community assets, and towns that lose their clubs, communities that lose their clubs, that really hurts. So this is a response to that. This is a kind of, if you like, coherent, logical, business-minded response to an industry that isn't quite functioning. So I'm going to consolidate. I'm going to share back office cost. I'm going to try and do the player trading better. A phrase that we haven't actually heard in this podcast series. I did wonder if one of our guests would use it. Is leakage. I often hear people talk about leakage. That if you have a football team, losing players is a form of leakage. It's like, how's that person? I used to have them under control. So if you think about Trent Alexander-Arnold, that's a classic case of a highly paid, really precious asset that they have allowed to go for nothing by their own failures. If you can somehow keep that within a group, you can sort of mitigate some of that risk. So I totally understand, completely understand. And I often, when people ask me about this stuff, would you want it for your club? And I'll sort of usually say, no, I don't think I would. But then it wasn't that long ago that my club very nearly shut. Padlocks the lot. And you're thinking, well, if, the choice between nothing and carrying on, yeah, okay. And if maybe we'd been bought by a multi-club group that, a bit like Black Knight, would I have been upset if someone like Tim had come along and said, we want to win, right? We want to get to know you guys. We're not going to have favourites here. Okay, just understand that there is a club at the top of this, but we want you guys to win. We're going to do something about your ground and your training ground, and you're going to get better players. I'd have probably gone, all right, well, I'm willing to give this a go. It's not what I would have chosen. And this is, I think, the reality of where we've got. So I understand the question. I have sympathy with large parts of it, but I'm afraid, sitting on a fence here, because I can see where the multi-clubbers are coming from too, and I can look at the entire industry, and I can see failing businesses. I can see businesses distressed assets, jobs at risk, losses, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not kind of surprised that people are trying to look at this and thinking, well, let's consolidate, let's create groups, let's try and be sustainable.
Yeah, very quickly, Matt, you're talking about your club there. How much say does the average fan or average fan group have? I mean, I feel fans are powerless to a certain degree about the people that do take over their club, because if you've got a club, for instance, that hasn't been doing so well, I was looking at administration not too long ago, many people are thinking, okay, yes, please, but then very few of us have looked down the line to see whether or not this is a legitimate group or whether or not they do indeed have the right ethos for our club.
Oh, I mean, this is so big. This is the fans. I know.
Well, we talk about long answers as well.
No, not just about the size of the answer, but I think the size of the issue. This is the problem. Yeah. So, as fans, you can get organised, and you can make it uncomfortable for someone to leave. Right? You can. It depends how stubborn and thick-skinned that person is. But ultimately, it's a bit like going on strike. You can withdraw your labour. You can withdraw your custom. Now that does require things to have got quite bad, because you know that you're making things worse in the short term. So there are so many clubs right now that are facing that dilemma. Fan bases: Reading, Swindon, Morecambe. Exactly. My heart goes out to all those guys. My team was there not that long ago. And there are loads more. Macclesfield, where I'm talking to you from, I live in Macclesfield. They lost their club. They have a Phoenix club that's coming back. Great, but it was horrible for a year or two that this town sort of lost its club, lost its its EFL place, and there was a sense of loss. So as fans groups, you can get organised to create change. You can get someone out. What you can't really do is do the vetting and do the choosing. You can't. Now, if there's an administration, you might have a bit more control. You might have a sort of an opportunity to maybe get organised, depending on the size of the club. Maybe you can have some influence, try and find a group of maybe wealthy fans. You can sort of congregate around them, you can cajole. It can happen, but ultimately it is. You can sort of tell your owner, we don't want you anymore, we want you out. But it's still really up for that owner to sort of choose their successor. This is the situation at Reading, it's the situation at Swindon, this is the situation at Morecambe, and it's really hard. You feel powerless. So I haven't got a great answer because there isn't a great answer, and this hasn't changed for as long as I've been doing this job. And I keep thinking things are going to get better. And then I look around, and there are any one time there are 5 or 6 clubs going through this, and it's depressing.
All right, Matt, let's finish on this one. This one is a question from Michael H, which is actually probably a really good way to wrap this up. Michael says, the first 2 podcast episodes have been really interesting. Thanks, Matt, Io and guest. Appreciate you, Michael. Keep those compliments coming in. But the question's actually fascinating because he says, to me, it feels like previously when this has been spoken about on the Athletic FC podcast, it's been negative and MCOs have been viewed as an existential threat to football. Has that view changed? Is there an acceptance that MCOs are here to stay and maybe even that benefits outweigh the cons? I guess after talking to Black Knight Group, I don't know, I have a much more interesting thought about MCOs based on the fact that all their teams seem to be punching at a good rate at this moment in time. But what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, again, another good question. And so if I just think about the question, so yes, I think they are here to stay. Now, you can argue they've been here a while. So I think we've referenced a few times that ENIC, the people that sort of ultimately went on to own Spurs, started doing this in the late 90s. They quickly put together they didn't own majority stakes at all these places, but Rangers, AEK Athens, Slavia Prague, Vicenza. I know I'm forgetting another one. I can't remember now. But anyway, they had 5 or 6. And they were the ones that kind of brought that competitive integrity issue to a head. I think in 97, 3 of their teams made the quarterfinals of the old Cup Winners' Cup. And UEFA were kind of caught unawares by that. I think only one of them they didn't draw each other. Only one of them went to the semi-final. The following year, it was like, okay, right, we've woken up. AEK and Slavia Prague made the old UEFA Cup, so the Europa League, and UEFA finally said, right, we're going to do something about this. You can't exercise control. Control was the issue, and they banned AEK, and it went to CAS. CAS upheld UEFA's ruling. So at that point, things did quieten down. All right, so it was almost like, UEFA are going to take this seriously. And we didn't really get it again for nearly 20 years until Red Bull emerged. And we definitely talked about Red Bull, haven't we? The whole Leipzig-Salzburg issue. That came to a head in 2017 when they both made the Champions League. And I think at that point, UEFA kind of fudged it. They let Red Bull create separation by separating the staff. They created different boards for each company. Red Bull Leipzig, or whatever they call it at the time, came RB Leipzig, Rasen Sport, and they just created enough separation, and that's where we're at. Ever since, that's where we're at. So we've had this whole spate in the last 2 or 3 years of similar good teams. So unlike that City Football Group example I mentioned 10 minutes or so ago, where there's a big club and then the others are much smaller. You've had Toulouse, AC Milan, you've had Vittoria, Villa, you've had Union San Gilloise and Brighton, Braga and PSG, Nice and Man United, and they have been forced to create, no staff, no player trading. Which again, if you think about, the whole point of this stuff. All right, so we want to succeed, we want to make Europe, and then the point, that kind of close cooperation in our network, we're not allowed to do. So we're in a weird period here where the football industry came up with a solution for the competitive integrity issue, which is, no, you both can't compete in the same competition if it's anyone's exercising control. 20 years on to, all right, well, there's so many of you now and it's really hard. Okay, we want you to sort of look like you're not exercising control. We want you to sort of at least the perception that you're not in cahoots with each other and talking to each other every day about players, we're okay with that. Will that be enough? I think it probably will, because I think UEFA there's enough precedence now. They let Nice do that. They let Toulouse and AC do that. So that's what will happen.
Is that someone's doorbell? Was that yours?
It was my doorbell, but it's okay.
Oh, Matt. Let's end it there. Thank you so much for your continued efforts the last 3 episodes. Honestly, all the work you've done behind the scenes to bring the guests to us, as well as all your hard work as a journalist on this. It's a really fascinating topic, and really appreciate your time on it as well. And also thanks to all our contributors as well, and to you guys listening, and also the readers as well. One more thank you to Malek for his contribution on today's show. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget also to leave us a little comment with your thoughts as well. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcast from.